Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. On this episode, I discover the top 10 food trends for 2023 with Joanne McArthur, president at Nourish Food Marketing, who returns to the podcast to discuss her latest annual trend report, Food is Transformative. Joanne, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast, or should I say welcome back to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Well, you and I first met back at Retail Council store. You were, I think, on the podcast talking about the wonderfulness of eggs.
Yes, yeah,
for a
that's
client.
right. The EQA program, yeah.
That's right. So you and I first met there, but then we've been running into each other, and particularly now that I'm more with Sylvain, more in the food side. You've been on The Food Professor, and you and I see each other. And I love your report, and I thought, hey, what a great opportunity to get you on the Voice of Retail and chat about it. So thanks for joining me. Where are you joining me from? Are you in the GTA area, or what part of the world are you in?
Yeah, I'm actually in the Nourish offices. We are located in an old converted Legion Hall at King, West, and Niagara Street, just around Bathurst.
Oh, that's a funky area. That's very nice.
Yeah,
very nice.
Absolutely.
And how long have you been back in the office? Like, what did you do during COVID? Was it the team, you and the team work at home? Are you hybrid? How are you approaching that?
We're hybrid now. We do a lot of content creation for clients. So people were adapting, and rather than doing it in the studio here, they were doing it from the home kitchen. But yeah, we've migrated back, and all our shoots are back here. And, people are 2 days a week, more if they want. It's a lovely office, so we tend to get people coming in a little more often. Yeah.
Yeah, and you do a lot of creative work, so being together helps creativity, right? It's not about productivity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not just about productivity.
No. It's not just, yeah. And it's also just the soft intangibles, and you really need to have that time in the office, but not every single day. Yeah.
So you think that'll be permanent? Like, did you do that? I'm on a bit of a tangent here, but you're so experienced, and I look to you as a kind of a leader. So, is this something you would have done before COVID, and is this something you think will persist? Is this the new way of work for you?
Absolutely. And, I have to say we'd set up our business, luckily, to be able to work from anywhere prior to the pandemic. So we were able to pivot quickly because we always wanted to let people, have time to focus. So we'd always had focus days where people, no meetings, work from home. So we've always had a hybrid, not to this degree. But, I think 2 days in the office, obviously more if there's client meetings, because our clients all want to come in. Now it's really interesting. There was a period there where they didn't even want to attend shoots.
Right.
They didn't want to be on set. And they've continued to do that hybrid approach, which I think is a whole lot more efficient anyway for their time. But they do like coming in for meetings now in real life. So, obviously the team comes in for that as well.
Right on. Well, we've kind of jumped in. Tell us a little bit about, I know you well, but my listeners may not. So tell us about yourself and what you do for a living.
Yeah, so what I do for a living is I'm a president of Nourish, and spent most of my career on the client side in CPG, great companies like Procter & Gamble, Unilever. Spent some time with retail giant Cadillac Fairview, and this all culminated in becoming a divisional president of Molson Coors with a seat on the North American management team. And started Nourish as the kind of agency I always wanted as a client on the client side, but never got. So we started Nourish 14 years ago, and we decided to specialize in food and beverage because my background was strong there. And I like to say we know a lot about a little.
And when you say, I remember you telling me this and describing it, when you say the agency that didn't exist, tell me, just to unpack that a little bit for me and the listeners. What's different, and what did you find was missing from let's call it a traditional agency?
Well, I guess that's specialization for one thing. An agency that brought insights to the table, right? And also understood your category. So there was a running start, and just that everybody who worked there was a specialist in your area. I'd also say having all the different services under one roof. So sort of that turnkey solution. So not, when I was on the client side, we'd have a roster of, literally 20, 30 agencies who all specialize in different things. But I think when you look at marketing, you really need to look at integration. You need to be very agnostic in terms of the tools you use. And those tools, of course, are constantly changing. And so I think there's just a lot of efficiency as well in having an agency that really understands your area.
Right. So as opposed to having to stitch together a bunch of different agencies and capabilities, you bring it on a one-stop shop, so to speak, with some specialization, right?
And I will say that, agencies are not agnostic in terms of tools. Usually they specialize in certain things. So I remember having this conversation every year when I was at Molson with the different agencies saying, like, don't come back with these big TV campaigns when we're selling to young men in the summer when they're not in front of a TV screen, right? And what would I keep getting would be those big campaigns.
That's what we're good at. We're a big
and that's
campaign
where we make our profit, right? It's the SUV of the ad agency. So I think that, the agency world was really slow to adapt to digital as well. That's kind of, we pride ourselves in being tool agnostic.
And what type of clients do you have? A lot of CPG companies, obviously in the food business, but retailers too. And just give me just so we get a good feel of who you work with on an ongoing basis.
So we work with clients across North America, the whole food ecosystem. So really, field to fork. So we have commodity groups, producers and processors, retailers, food service associations. And, the nice thing about Nourish is we also here, we've got, as I mentioned, all the services under one roof. But we also have, you have what you'd expect, the branding, packaging, advertising, marketing, but we also have the test kitchen and video and photography studios.
Right on, right on. All right, well, we're here to talk about, we're here to talk about you, but we're also here to talk about your 2023 trend report. So let's start in with the tradecraft around the trend report. It's not your first one. Tell us a bit about the background, how these reports come together, what kind of prognostication tools do you use, and just tell me how the report, a bit of the history, I guess, the origin story, and then we'll get into the report itself.
Yeah, so we started 7 years ago, and because of our specialization and working across the whole food ecosystem, we were also often able to connect dots that others needed help seeing. So we kind of consider this trend report, because we have put a lot of time into it. It really is our gift back to the industry. We also do industry-specific trend reports as well to help clients develop, their innovation pipelines and future-proof their businesses. But we consult multiple databases, we conduct original research, and again, we learn from working across numerous categories. So it really advises our gut feel, but obviously we don't share any proprietary knowledge as part of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it kind of rolls up all the insights that you kind of pick up on the day-to-day basis, kind of roll up and, kind of sum up kind of thing. And when, as you look forward, I mean, there's always fun in predicting. Do you start with a long list of things, or I'm just kind of super?
Oh, absolutely.
Curious. Yeah, and then wheedle them down to just the key ones.
It builds throughout the year. Yeah. And the tough thing is, because we talk trends, not fads. So, some of the trends that we talked about, in 2018 are still in play. Right. So these things are still so it's a much harder process to try to see what's kind of happening. And we started a very, I'd say, macro view in terms of what's just happening in terms of the world and country, and how that all then, is manifesting itself down into food, or could in the future.
Right. So this report you just put out, and by the way, I'll put a link in the show notes to your website where you can go find the report and learn more about you as well. The future is transformative. This is the title of the new report. So take us through a high line overview of what you've discovered, as you said, what your starting point was, and then we'll go through the report in a bit more detail.
Yeah, so I think a lot of times we see sort of this gradual trajectory with trends, but when we step back, we really do think we are at a place where we're about to jump forward a decade, driven by some factors, but really similar to over the COVID period. I'd say in a lot of areas, that accelerated us a decade forward in terms of online ordering, things like that. But we do think that the overall rate of change driven by climate change is about to jump forward by a decade. And part of that is just, consumers are seeing it every day. They're experiencing climate change. But also, I think if you look at the legislation that the U.S. Has passed, it's the most significant climate legislation in history, called the Inflation Reduction Act. But it's really going to drive, close to probably up to 42% reduction in emissions by 2030. So we think that that's really going to drive things ahead. And what happens in the U.S. obviously is going to drive other countries as well.
Interesting. So it's a bit of a tipping point, so to speak. I mean, I was just writing a report myself. And of course, I guess on the retail side, it's fun to complain about the weather again versus a planet killing virus. So that's the upside. But those
two may be linked, though, right? Those two may be linked.
Yeah, they may, that's true. But let me tell you, we're back to, oh my God, it's hard to sell winter wear when you're on a patio outdoors in Toronto in November, right? Like it's just, as you say, you're experiencing this strangeness.
Yeah, and farmers are experiencing it firsthand.
Yeah, well, of course, they're closest to the land, right? They really experience it firsthand. So that's kind of your jumping off point. But let's get into some of the first, first trends. Now, the rise of, I'm going to try and pronounce reductilism? Reductionarianism. Okay, there you go.
I know, we're coining a new word. It's kind of fun.
Love that. Yeah. Love that. Reductionarianism. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so here, we really think that this whole faux meat category is just a transition point, and we're really going to jump ahead there. For a couple of reasons. There's been, consumers want, less processed food. We're hearing every day, I'm hearing some new study around ultra processed food and how it's bad for us. And yet, if you look at these products, they kind of got a get out of jail free card there.
Yeah. Big ingredient decks. Yeah. Big ingredient decks on these.
Yeah.
things.
And so, they may be better for planet health, but not really for personal health. And so I think, we've seen that category kind of falter a bit. We're now seeing the rise of, cell-based ag is getting the green light in the U.S. Yeah. But I think we're going to see we're going to move ahead to whole foods. This whole concept of it's either or, it's either you're a vegetarian or you're a meat eater. I don't think so. I think we're going to see people perhaps move down the protein scale for cost and climate reasons, high inflation environments. But I do think that, consumers are going to just eat a little bit differently and look at more whole foods, whether that's legumes or, eating less but better meat in terms of, grass-fed, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So quality over quantity would be another way to phrase that, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
Though I think your point is, it's not, there's some economics at play here, obviously, with, Sylvain's report now out talking about another 7% increase in food price. So clearly that's going to be, now that's more we hope that's more, like as you said, you're not into fads, you're into trends. So, the prices could come down in 2 years. So you're not really focused on price.
Yeah, but consumer behavior will have changed too, right? Over that period. If you start cooking differently and eating differently over a high inflation environment, when prices come down, that may become a splurge, but it probably won't make its way back into your normal way of eating.
Oh, I see. So these patterns in the way we eat kind of stick is what you think.
Well, look at what happened over COVID and online ordering in terms of food delivery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big leap forward. Okay, now the second one, good eats, better sleep. I can tell you there's a good one. As in this household, we talk about sleep a lot and how to get a better sleep. So is this where people start thinking about all these holistic things that affect the way the quality of their sleep?
Yeah, so I think during COVID, the focus was on not getting sick. And now that we're coming out of that, the focus is shifting to getting healthier. And consumers are understanding that sleep is the true foundation of health. Most of us don't get enough. But the other thing that's happening is most people now have some sort of, they're wearing a ring or a watch, some kind of wearable technology. So they're actually now getting a view every morning of, not just the quantity, but the quality of their sleep. So that's really driving investment in sleep tech. So we've seen huge increases, 66% in just 1 year. But again, we're not seeing it in other products like food and beverage. So we think that there's a big opportunity there because there's a big link between how well you sleep and the foods you eat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know for myself, if I'm up late and I don't get a good night, like last night I was up late and I started raiding the fridge at 4:00 in the morning for a piece of sliced cheese or something,
Yeah. And there's things, there's nutrients that can help you with your sleep. Some foods naturally have it. And there's been a little bit in terms of the beverage side, but we just haven't seen much innovation. And considering how this is the foundation of health, you would expect more.
You'll have to send me an email to see if there's food for helping me edit podcasts, because that seems to keep me up late at night. So maybe it's popcorn or something. I don't know. Yeah, another one. This one's for the ladies. So female food. Talk about that. What's female food? Is it gender-based idea of what's that?
Yeah. So if I told you that there was an unaddressed market over half the population, you'd probably be interested, right?
Or skeptical, like how can that be? How can we miss that?
I will tell you, as a female, my favorite pair of shoes are the pair of Lululemon running shoes I got. Because it's the first time that they just haven't been scaled down from the men's shoe.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right? So we are not just smaller men. And yet everything in our lives tend to be designed that way. There's a reason why women get into more car accidents, because they are designed for, cars are designed for men. Seatbelts are designed for men. So there hasn't been a lot. And even if you look at health studies, medical research, it's been very male focused. Now we're seeing a huge increase in research there. There's been a 9x increase in published research papers over the past decade. So we think that's going to unlock more opportunities for food manufacturers. But if you think about it, we have hormonal differences, whether it's pregnancy, menstruation, menopause,
sleep.
And when, we're very different. And yet the only time I see a female targeted product is if I go into a health store and you see like a PMS tea or something like that. But there's some real food cravings that come out of this. So we think that there are opportunities to develop products. We think for retailers, there's also an opportunity to have more of, I'd call it a solutions focused section in their stores. So like you've seen, gluten-free sections in stores, you're starting to see maybe keto sections, but why not have something that's focused on sleep, focused on female food needs, because they're different.
Do you worry, and I'm sure you advise your clients quite clearly on this, what do they call it? The pink tax, right? The same product for a little bit more because it's targeted at women. Do you worry that this is just some might look at this as just a profit opportunity versus a real solution?
Well, if it solves a real need, I think there'll be a market for it. So I talked about, lactation cookies that are out there are doing well. In the UK, which often is much further ahead in terms of products. There's a chocolate company, that's, targeted to different times. of different life stages. So yeah, absolutely. If you're just putting pink on something and charging more, you're going to be called out. Especially with social media and how active younger generations are in terms of researching and calling companies out. So, but as long as there's a real benefit, I think, you're in a good place.
Well, you created a nice segue, social media. I'm very torn about social media. On the one hand, I think it's the worst thing that was ever developed in our lives, and I think it's led to a lot of very bad things. And on the other hand, it has such great potential. I mean, let's just talk about food. I mean, food TikToks and all kinds of stuff. I'm on YouTube myself with a cooking show. I couldn't do that 20 years ago. So how do you see social media and food? What's your prognostication around that?
Well, I think social media is always going to be with us, whether it's the metaverse or whatever the next tool is, because there will always be a next tool. But it goes back to how we're wired as humans. So any tool that makes us more social is going to win, because we're just social beings. But I do think in terms of food, consumers are willing to give up some privacy concerns if there's a benefit, right? If you know me. And what we're starting to see really, a couple of things here is just how social media is uniting us globally. We're allowed to shop, and buy things online. You see a recipe, you click it, and it automatically, will send you the ingredients. And we're also seeing innovation in food take a different path than it has historically taken, which is kind of interesting. So it used to go through fine dining down to QSRs and then finally make its way onto retail shelves. But we're now all seeing these trends coming out of TikTok. And they're kind of jumping restaurants and going right into retail. So, that's happening as well. Yeah,
it's really, it's an accelerant for sure. The TikToks of the world of, do an amazing job of finding the right things at the right place. But, for me, it's more ideation than it is, I don't click a button to go find those ingredients, but because I know where to get.
The thing is, you can now, right? If I see something I like on social media, there's a number of platforms now where, I see the recipe, I like it, and I just hit a button and everything comes all integrated and delivered to my door. So it kind of satisfies that immediate want, which we've gotten really used to, right? Delivery never seems to be fast enough for some of us. So I think it does provide that essential bridge for consumers.
I want to jump ahead a couple because we want to leave something on the table, so to speak, for the viewers to go to dive in. I want to talk about your point about science fiction, the science farming, and you mentioned it earlier, cellular protein. We've had a big, Singapore I think was first, and now the U.S. FDA is lab grown.
Green light,
lab grown meat. I'm not sure everybody's aware of what. Spend a few minutes on that. Because start with a definition, because I think some people think it's artificial, but it's really fundamentally not. So I'm not sure everyone who would be listening would understand what you're talking about. And then what makes you think that people are going to start saying, okay, I'll leap forward from plant-based meat to now grown in a lab? What you think we've reached a tipping point on that? Talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, so I think it's going to need a good branding and marketing job for sure. But it takes those cells and it grows it, basically brews it or ferments it in a tank. And
we could be talking steak here. I mean, just to be clear.
Absolutely. But it's already out there in terms of some ingredients. So we're seeing it in dairy. Perfect Day is a company out of the U.S., and they have come up with cellular milk proteins. We're seeing that there's an ice cream that you can now buy in the U.S. called Brave Robot, which is made totally with that.
Would you call it Brave Robot?
Yeah, Brave Robot.
Okay. I'm not sure that's the branding that they'd be going for, but that's fine.
Probably not. I think they're using it as more of a proof of concept.
Yeah. Just don't call it Soylent Green, right? Don't call it Soylent Green.
Though probably only a certain couple of generations would understand that. But it really allows, the reason why I do think consumers will go for it is it's coming down in price. In a big way, but also it gets over the whole guilt of animal welfare, as well as reduces carbon emissions, which is a huge issue on the agricultural side. I think they estimate ag, contributes 35% of that. So we're going to have to solve for that. And this is a way to do that. And if mouthfeel is the same, I do think consumers will eventually, at least younger consumers will eventually get over it. Everything I've seen is, Gen Z, millennials are very accepting of these kind of products. They, they're more accepting of GMOs, CRISPR technology. So, science is good for that generation.
So let's last question for you. Of course, there's an audience on the Voice of Retail is certainly not limited to food or grocers or people who sell that. Any broader lessons or a lesson that you could think of that would apply to all retail in general? I mean, I could think of a few looking at your list, but what jumps out at you as a lesson for retail and some advice moving forward?
Think of shopper solutions rather than categories. That's been one that I've been banging for a while. I mean, you walk into any store, especially a grocery store, and they are set up exactly the same way that they were like 50 years ago. The same things, you go down the shelf and there are the same categories, but that's not how a consumer wants to shop. It's how they've been forced to shop. So I think, being solutions first is one way. Also, use your digital shelves as a way to try out some of these new trends. We know that space in store is very limited, but I would use my digital assortment as a way of trying out some of these trends as well.
Interesting. Well, listen, it's been a fascinating time. Great to have you back on the mic. If people want to get in touch with you, learn more, and keep up with what you and Nourish does, where should they go?
Yeah, absolutely. So the website is nourish.marketing, no .ca or .com, just nourish.marketing. And you can download the full report as well as past reports so you can see what our track record is. Yeah. Encourage that. You can sign up for a monthly newsletter as well where we share more insight. And please link in with me, Joanne McArthur on LinkedIn.
Well, fantastic. And I'll put a few of those links in the show notes as well, just in case anybody didn't have a pen handy as they're walking their doggo as they're listening. Joanne, thanks so much for joining me on The Voice of Retail. It was a real treat to, as always, to touch base. And I look forward to seeing you in the upcoming shows, probably at the Restaurant Canada show, Seattle, that's coming up as well. So look forward to seeing you in person real soon.
Yeah, great to get back to real life.
Thanks for tuning into this special episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, be sure and click and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically twice a week. And check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Conversations with Commerce Next podcast, and the Food Professor podcast with Dr. Sylvain Charlebois. Last but not least, if you're into barbecue, check out my all-new YouTube barbecue show, Last Request Barbecue, with new episodes each and every week. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of ME LeBlanc Company and Maven Media. And if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at meleblanc.co. Have a safe week, everyone.